Breaking, federal agents say a coordinated FBI raid has dismantled an $85 million trucking network, resulting in dozens of arrests and sweeping seizures.
At 6:47 this morning, federal authorities confirmed the largest coordinated trucking network takedown in American history. 83 arrests, 5 states, and $85 million in untraceable cash that was never supposed to see daylight again. What started as a routine traffic stop on a frozen Minnesota highway has now exposed something far darker than anyone imagined. A shadow empire built on American roads. A criminal pipeline that stretched from the heartland to the Horn of Africa. And a network so sophisticated, it turned our own supply chain into a weapon against us. But here is where it gets worse. The drivers were not the masterminds. They were the foot soldiers. And the person giving the orders was not hiding in some foreign compound. He was sitting in a government office in Minnesota, making speeches about public safety, shaking hands with federal officials, smiling for cameras. This is the story of how a ghost fleet hid inside one of the Midwest's most trusted trucking companies. How they moved tons of narcotics through blizzards while police were too busy fighting ice to fight crime. And how one state trooper's instinct on a frozen night brought the whole thing crashing down. Stay with me, because every layer of this investigation is worse than the last. 4:19 in the morning. Highway 52, southern Minnesota. The temperature had dropped to 32 below zero. The kind of cold that turns breath into ice crystals before it leaves your lungs. The kind of cold that keeps most people inside, wrapped in blankets, waiting for dawn. But on that frozen stretch of highway, a semi-truck with the North Star hauling logo was crawling through the darkness. Its headlights cut through sheets of blowing snow. The road was nearly empty. Just the hum of the engine and the whistle of Arctic wind. A state trooper noticed the truck drifting slightly. Not enough to be dangerous. Just enough to be noticed. He pulled behind it, flashed his lights once. The truck slowed. Air brakes hissed in the frozen silence. To anyone watching, this was a standard winter inspection. The kind of check that happens thousands of times across the upper Midwest every year. Nothing special. Nothing alarming. The trooper approached the cab. The driver was calm, cooperative. He handed over his logs without hesitation. But something was wrong. The logs did not match the load. The weight distribution was off by nearly 2,000 pounds. The trailer was listed as carrying insulation materials, but the numbers did not add up. The trooper called for backup. When the inspection team drilled into the sidewall of the trailer, they did not hit insulation. They hit a hidden compartment. A false wall that ran the entire length of the truck frame. Inside were vacuum-sealed packages stacked with surgical precision, cocaine, heroin, and enough fentanyl to kill every person in the state of Minnesota 10 times over. The officers thought they had caught a smuggler. They were wrong. When they held the driver for questioning, he did not ask for a lawyer. He asked for a deal. And the information he gave federal agents over the next hour would turn a traffic stop into a national security crisis. He was not working alone. He was part of a ghost fleet. 83 drivers. Identical modified trailers, fixed routes through 5 states, and a financial pipeline that had moved $85 million out of the United States without triggering a single federal alert. What agents found on Highway 52 was not just a drug bust. It was the discovery of a parallel shipping network that had been operating in plain sight for years. And the man running it was not some cartel boss in a foreign country. He was Deputy Commissioner Raymond Gessler of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. To understand how this happened, you have to understand North Star hauling. For years, North Star was considered a pillar of the regional economy. They moved goods across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois. Building materials, heating supplies, food products. Their trucks were a common sight on every interstate in the upper Midwest. But the investigation that began on Highway 52 revealed that North Star was not one company. It was 2. Federal investigators discovered a specific group of employees. 83 drivers, mostly Somali nationals, who operated under a completely different set of rules than the rest of the workforce. While regular drivers changed routes based on weather and demand, these 83 men followed strict, unchangeable paths. They drove the same roads, stopped at the same locations, worked almost exclusively at night. And every single one of their routes passed through inspection points that were mysteriously closed for maintenance whenever they rolled through. The genius of the operation was in its camouflage. They were not hiding in unmarked vans. They were hiding inside the same branded trucks as legitimate employees. The same logos. The same paperwork. The same scheduling software. This is what military intelligence calls parallel logistics. Using the cover of legal commerce to mask the movement of contraband. Moving pallets of legitimate freight in the front of the trailer, while the false walls concealed something far more deadly. But the physical movement of narcotics was only half the operation. The money. Investigators linked North Star's ownership to a web of shell companies with no clear business purpose. Funds did not flow through traditional banks. They moved through informal transfer networks designed to fragment transactions into amounts too small to trigger federal alerts. Over a 3-year period, more than $85 million was transferred out of the United States to accounts in East Africa and the Middle East. The transfers were disguised as family remittances, small payments that looked like immigrant workers sending money home to relatives. But when analysts compiled the data, they saw a river of cash flowing out of the American heartland, and that river led straight to networks that had nothing to do with trucking. The scariest part was how they weaponized the weather. Analysts found that the Ghost Fleet's activity spiked during the coldest months of winter. During blizzards and deep freezes, police resources are redirected to accident response and public safety. Roadside inspections drop dramatically because it is simply too dangerous to keep officers outside for extended periods. The network had turned the Minnesota winter into a strategic advantage. They moved their largest shipments when law enforcement was too busy fighting ICE to fight crime. And the man who made it all possible was Deputy Commissioner Raymond Gessler. 72 hours after the Highway 52 arrest. FBI Cyber Forensics Lab. Minneapolis Field Office. The room was cold and humming with server fans. Analysts had been working around the clock to crack the encrypted drives seized from the arrested driver's cab. The encryption was military grade, the kind of protection you do not see in ordinary criminal operations. When they finally broke through, the screen filled with a network diagram that made senior agents go silent. They called it Operation Frostline. The diagram showed North Star hauling at the center of a web that stretched across 5 states and 3 continents. Shell companies with innocuous names like Prairie Logistics LLC and Heartland Supply Partners. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Dubai, and Nairobi. A charity foundation that claimed to provide humanitarian aid but existed only on paper. But the most damaging discovery was the digital signature linking every major transaction to a single authorization code. That code belonged to Raymond Gessler, Deputy Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the man responsible for overseeing highway maintenance schedules, inspection protocols, wait station operations. For years, Gessler had been quietly manipulating the system, closing inspection stations for fake maintenance when Ghost Fleet trucks were scheduled to pass, altering patrol grids to create blind spots on key routes, providing advance warning when federal agencies planned surprise checkpoints. He had not just looked the other way, he had redesigned the system to serve the network. The encryption keys revealed something else. Gessler was not working alone. Embedded in the files were communication logs linking him to a figure identified only as the coordinator. This person operated from overseas and provided strategic direction for the entire operation. The logs showed that Frostline was not just a smuggling network. It was a long-term infiltration project. The goal was to establish permanent control over a major American transportation corridor, to turn the upper Midwest into a secure logistics hub for international criminal operations. One analyst stared at the screen and said what everyone was thinking. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. And the operation was just beginning. 5:47 in the morning. 3 days later, Federal Command Center, Minneapolis. The room was filled with screens showing a digital map of the upper Midwest. Dozens of red markers pulsed across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois. Each marker represented a known asset of the Ghost Fleet. Warehouses, repair shops, transfer hubs, safe houses. The FBI special agent in charge stood before a room of 200 federal personnel. Representatives from the DEA, ICE, DHS, ATF, and tactical units from 5 state police agencies. The mission was clear. Total network eradication in a single coordinated strike. Operation Northern Breaker was authorized at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The goal was to hit every node of the network simultaneously. Secure the trucks. Freeze the accounts. Arrest every member of the Ghost Fleet before anyone could run. The timing was deliberate. Another winter storm was hitting the region. The same conditions the network used for cover. But this time, federal agents were not pulling back from the cold. They were waiting in it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the command center gave the green light. Across 5 states, tactical teams began to move. On Interstate 94, a convoy of 3 North Star trucks was battling heavy snow. The drivers saw flashing lights behind them and assumed they were snowplows clearing the road. They were wrong. A line of unmarked federal SUVs and state police vehicles surrounded the 18-wheelers and forced them onto the frozen shoulder. The drivers did not even have time to reach for their radios. By the time the air brakes locked, tactical officers were climbing the truck steps with weapons drawn. There was no negotiation. The drivers were pulled out into the Arctic wind and secured against the icy pavement. At the same moment, the main assault was hitting North Star Hauling's headquarters in Minneapolis. An armored vehicle smashed through the perimeter fence at 40 miles per hour. FBI tactical teams poured through the gap. Flashbang grenades detonated in the loading bays, freezing the night shift workers in place. Federal agents swept through the facility in coordinated waves. The office building, the maintenance bays, the server room that controlled the entire operation. Inside the dispatch center, they found what they were looking for: a dual-screen system that showed both the legitimate and shadow operations. One screen tracked legal freight, the other tracked the ghost fleet in real time. But the physical evidence in the warehouse was even more damning. In one maintenance bay, investigators found a trailer mid-modification. Panels had been pulled away to reveal the engineering behind the network. The truck frame had been retrofitted with hydraulic false walls. To a casual observer or a standard X-ray scan, the trailer appeared normal. But behind the concealed compartment was a space that could hold 3,000 pounds of contraband. The space was not empty. Agents pulled out package after package. Bricks of fentanyl wrapped in material designed to defeat detection dogs. Vacuum-sealed bundles of cash totaling over $6 million. And crates of disassembled weapons labeled as machine parts. This confirmed the most disturbing aspect of the case. The network was not just importing narcotics. They were exporting weapons. The supply chain worked in both directions. Across the upper Midwest, the trap was closing. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a repair shop that served as a transfer hub was raided by DEA tactical units. Inside, they found floor safes containing $4.2 million in cash and ledgers documenting transfers to accounts in Nairobi and Mogadishu. In Chicago, a truck parked at a quiet industrial lot was surrounded by IC agents. The driver attempted to flee on foot but was brought down by a K-9 unit. Inside his cab, investigators found a satellite phone with encrypted communications and a map marking drop locations that corresponded to no legitimate delivery route. In Des Moines, a warehouse listed as cold storage for agricultural products was found to contain a hidden room where cash was counted and packaged for transport. The walls were lined with soundproofing material. The floor had drains. The room had been designed for activities that required privacy. By 5 o'clock in the morning, reports were flooding back to the command center. All 83 Ghost Fleet drivers were in custody. The office staff was detained. The mechanics who built the false walls were in handcuffs. And Raymond Gessler was arrested at his home in a wealthy Minneapolis suburb, still wearing his pajamas when federal agents came through his door. In 6 hours, the network had taken more damage than it had in 6 years of careful operation. But the investigation was far from over. The following weeks revealed how deeply the corruption had penetrated. As investigators examined seized servers and financial records, they discovered that Gessler was not the only government official on the payroll. 17 law enforcement officers across 5 states had been receiving payments. Border Patrol agents who looked the other way at specific crossings. State troopers who provided advance warning of checkpoint locations. A county sheriff who had personally approved the permits allowing North Star to operate in his jurisdiction. The payments were sophisticated. Not direct deposits. Not cash handoffs. The officers received their money through a network of fake consulting contracts and ghost employment arrangements. One sergeant in Wisconsin had been receiving an additional $60,000 per year for services that existed only on paper. Internal communications showed that raid schedules were being leaked days in advance. Patrol grids were being manipulated to create windows of opportunity. Information about federal investigations was being sold to the network for prices that depended on the urgency. Honest officers who had suspected something was wrong found their reports buried, their concerns dismissed, their careers quietly sabotaged. One veteran detective in Minneapolis broke down during his interview with federal agents. He had reported suspicious activity 3 times over 2 years. Each time, his report disappeared into administrative limbo. Each time, he was told there was insufficient evidence to proceed. Now he understood why. The network had not just infiltrated law enforcement. They had created a parallel system, a shadow force that protected criminal operations while wearing the same badges as honest officers. 23 law enforcement personnel were arrested in the weeks following the initial raids, including a deputy police chief who had served for 27 years. The federal prosecutor handling the case made a statement that captured the scope of the betrayal. What we discovered was not a few bad apples. It was a systematic corruption of the institutions meant to protect the public. These individuals did not just fail in their duty. They actively worked against the people they swore to serve. As forensic accountants traced the $85 million, they discovered something even more alarming. The money had not simply disappeared into foreign accounts. It had looped back into the American system through a series of investments designed to expand the network's influence. Shell companies connected to the operation had purchased commercial properties in 3 states, gas stations along key routes, truck stops that served as rest points for the Ghost Fleet, even a small regional bank that processed many of the suspicious transactions. The network was not just extracting money from America. It was reinvesting in infrastructure that would allow operations to continue indefinitely. Intelligence analysts found documents outlining a 5-year expansion plan. The goal was to extend the Ghost Fleet's reach from the upper Midwest to the Canadian border and down to the Gulf Coast, to create a transportation corridor that could move virtually anything without detection. The plan included provisions for recruiting additional government officials, expanding the network of compromised law enforcement, and establishing backup systems that could survive the loss of any individual node. One file, labeled Phase 3, described the ultimate objective: establishing the upper Midwest as a permanent logistics hub for international criminal operations, a region where the network controlled enough infrastructure and personnel to operate with near impunity. The analyst who discovered the file compared it to franchise documentation. The network was planning to scale. The human cost of Operation Frostline cannot be measured in dollars alone. The fentanyl that moved through those trucks did not disappear into warehouses. It flooded communities across 5 states. It killed high school students who thought they were taking prescription pills. It killed construction workers managing chronic pain. It killed parents who left behind children who would never understand why. Federal health officials estimate that the network's supply contributed to over 300 overdose deaths across the upper Midwest during its years of operation. 300 families destroyed. 300 funerals. 300 empty chairs at holiday tables. The weapons that moved in the opposite direction funded violence in regions most Americans will never see. Conflicts that displaced families. That created refugees. That perpetuated cycles of suffering that span generations. And at the center of it all was a man who took an oath to serve the public, who accepted the trust of his community, who used his position not to protect people, but to profit from their destruction. Raymond Gessler now faces over 40 federal charges including drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, and corruption of public office. If convicted on all counts, he will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. But no sentence can undo the damage. If you are still watching, tap like so more people see this story. The algorithm buries content that does not get engagement. Help drag this into the light. There is a lesson in what happened in Minnesota. And it is not just about trucks or drugs or money. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through paperwork, through policy, through the slow, patient corruption of systems we trust. The Ghost Fleet operated for years because it understood something fundamental about America. We trust our institutions. We trust the logos on the sides of trucks. We trust the officials who manage our highways. We trust that someone is watching. And when that trust is betrayed, the damage is not just financial. It is spiritual. It makes people question whether anything they believe is real. The men and women who brought down Operation Frostline restored something important. They proved that the system can still work. That one alert trooper on a frozen highway can start a chain reaction that brings down an entire criminal empire. But they also proved how close we came to losing. If that driver had not pulled over, if the weight had been off by a smaller margin, if the trooper had decided it was too cold to inspect, the network might still be operating today, growing stronger, reaching further, corrupting more. Comment expose if you want this corruption dragged into the light. Comment investigate if you think there are more ghost fleets on American roads right now. Because here is the truth that keeps federal agents awake at night. North Star Hauling was one company, in one region, using one set of routes. How many others are out there? How many trucks are rolling down American highways right now with false walls and hidden compartments? How many officials are on payrolls we have not discovered? How many systems have been quietly redesigned to serve interests that have nothing to do with the public good? The answer is we do not know. And that uncertainty is perhaps the most frightening part of this story. The roads we drive every day. The trucks we pass without a second thought. The institutions we trust to keep us safe. Any of them could be compromised. Operation Northern Breaker proved that criminal networks can be dismantled, but it also proved how sophisticated they have become, how patient, how willing to invest years in building infrastructure that hides in plain sight. This is the new landscape of organized crime, not cartels fighting in the streets, not obvious violence that draws attention, but quiet infiltration, patient corruption, the slow takeover of systems we depend on, and the only defense is vigilance. Honest officers who refuse to look the other way. Analysts who follow the money wherever it leads. Citizens who demand accountability from the institutions that serve them. The battle for America's highways is not over. It has only just begun. Remember, this story is fictional and created for dramatic purposes. But the threats it depicts are real. Criminal networks do target transportation infrastructure. Corruption does infiltrate government agencies. And the consequences are measured in human lives. Stay alert, stay informed, and never assume that the truck passing you on the highway is exactly what it appears to be. Subscribe for more investigations like this. Because the stories that matter most are the ones that powerful people do not want you to see.